The gunshot echoed across the valley, startling Penelope Blackwood from her reverie as she stood at the kitchen window of the homestead she had reluctantly come to call home. Wyoming Territory, 1879, a life she had never imagined for herself when she had dreamed of a future with Adam Thornton, the man who had stolen her heart 5 years ago before riding west, promising to return but never did. What was that? Thomas Grant, her husband of 8 months, barely looked up from his newspaper, spectacles perched on his thin nose. "Just hunters, I suspect," Penelope replied, though her heart hammered in her chest. Every unexpected sound still made her think of him of Adam, though she tried desperately to bury those thoughts. Thomas nodded absently, returning to his reading. He was a good man, stable, dependable, and 15 years her senior. The banker had offered her security when her family's ranch faced foreclosure after her father's death. Marriage to Thomas had saved her mother and younger siblings from destitution. It wasn't love, but it was survival. Penelope wiped her hands on her apron and resumed kneading the bread dough with more force than necessary. At 23, she had resigned herself to a life of comfort without passion. The wild dreams of her youth of adventure and consuming love had been sacrificed at the altar of practicality. Outside, the autumn wind scattered golden leaves across the yard of their modest but respectable home on the outskirts of Promise Creek. The town had grown considerably since its founding, now boasting a proper bank where Thomas worked, 2 saloons, a general store, and even a small schoolhouse where Penelope occasionally helped teach. "I'll be late tonight," Thomas announced, folding his newspaper precisely. "Bank ledgers need balancing before the end of the month." Penelope nodded, not looking up from her task. "I'll keep your dinner warm." After Thomas left, the house fell into a silence that seemed to press in on her from all sides. She finished her baking, then decided to walk into town for supplies, anything to escape the quiet emptiness of her marriage. Promise Creek's Main Street bustled with the usual activity: freight wagons loaded with supplies, cowboys fresh from the trail with money to spend, and town folk going about their business. Penelope greeted acquaintances with practiced smiles that never quite reached her eyes. She was selecting fabric at Wilson's General Store when a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. A stranger had ridden into town, nothing unusual in itself, except for the reaction he was causing. Mrs. Wilson rushed to the window. "My word, that's Adam Thornton, isn't it?" Thought he was long dead after that trouble with the McDermott gang. The name hit Penelope like a physical blow. The bolt of calico slipped from her suddenly numb fingers. It couldn't be. Adam was gone, had been gone for years without a word. She had waited, hoped, prayed until hope had withered and died. "Are you all right, Mrs. Grant? You've gone white as a sheet," Mrs. Wilson said, concerned. "I'm fine. Just remembered something urgent at home." Penelope gathered her parcels with trembling hands. "Please put the fabric on my account. I'll return tomorrow." She slipped out the back door of the shop, heart pounding wildly. She couldn't face him, not now, not after she had married another man. What would she say? What could she possibly say? But fate was not kind to Penelope that day. As she hurried down the alley behind the buildings, a tall figure stepped into her path from around the corner. "Penny." The deep voice, so achingly familiar, stopped her in her tracks. She looked up into eyes as blue as the Montana sky, set in a face that had haunted her dreams for years. It was him, but changed, harder, leaner. A thin scar ran along his jawline that hadn't been there before. The boyish charm had been replaced by something dangerous and magnetic. Adam. His name escaped her lips before she could stop it. He removed his hat, revealing hair the color of sun-bleached wheat, longer than she remembered. Been a long time. 5 years, 3 months, and 17 days, not that she had been counting. "What are you doing here?" she managed, gripping her packages so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Came back for what's mine." His gaze was direct, challenging. "Heard some interesting news when I rode into town. Seems you're Mrs. Grant now." The accusation in his tone sparked a sudden fury within her. "You have no right." "I reckon I don't," he cut her off, his voice deceptively calm. "But I'm here all the same." "You left," the words burst from her. "You left and never came back, never sent word. What was I supposed to do, wait forever?" "I never stopped trying to get back to you, Penny," Adam said, stepping closer. "Things happen, bad things. But I made a promise and I'm here to keep it. You're 5 years too late." She stepped back, desperate to maintain distance between them. "I'm married now. To a man twice your age who you don't love. It wasn't a question. That's none of your concern." A horse whinnied nearby, breaking the tension. Adam glanced over his shoulder, then back at her. "We need to talk properly, not here in an alley. There's nothing to talk about." "There's everything to talk about, Penny." His voice softened, and for a moment she saw the young man she had loved so desperately. "Meet me tomorrow, Wilson's Creek, where we used to go." Before she could refuse, he placed his hat back on his head and walked away, leaving her trembling with anger, confusion, and something else she refused to name. Penelope returned home in a daze, her mind spinning with memories she had forced herself to bury: moonlit rides across open prairie, stolen kisses behind her father's barn, promises whispered under starlit skies. Adam had been everything wild and free that she had longed for, the embodiment of the frontier spirit that had called to her soul. That night, she moved through her evening routine mechanically, barely tasting the food she ate with Thomas, responding to his perfunctory conversation with automatic replies. When he commented that she seemed distracted, she blamed a headache and retired early. In the darkness of her bedroom, separate from Thomas's by mutual, unspoken agreement, Penelope stared at the ceiling, torn between duty and desire. Meeting Adam would be madness, a betrayal of her vows. Yet the thought of not seeing him, of letting him ride away again without explanation, was unbearable. Morning came after a sleepless night, and with it, decision. She would meet him once, only once, to find closure. She told Thomas she was visiting a sick friend and set out on horseback toward Wilson's Creek, a secluded spot 3 miles from town where a small stream cut through rocky terrain, creating a hidden valley lush with cottonwoods. Adam was already there when she arrived, his tall form leaning against a tree, hat pulled low over his eyes. He straightened as she approached, watching as she dismounted with practiced grace. "Didn't think you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't." Penelope left her horse to graze and stood several feet away from him, arms crossed defensively. "Say what you came to say, Adam." Instead of speaking, he reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded, worn piece of paper. He handed it to her silently. With reluctant hands, she opened it and found herself staring at her own handwriting. It was the letter she had written him 5 years ago, professing her love and promising to wait for his return. "I carried that across 4 territories," Adam said quietly. "Through gunfights and blizzards, fever and prison. It kept me alive when nothing else would." "Prison," the word escaped her in a shocked whisper. Adam nodded grimly. "The McDermott gang ambushed us near the Colorado border, killed my partners. I survived but got blamed for their robberies. Took 3 years to prove my innocence." He stepped closer. "I wrote to you every month from that cell. Letters were supposed to be sent when I got transferred to the territorial prison." "I never received any letters," Penelope said, confusion clouding her features. "Found out later the warden was stealing mail. Anything with money or valuables. My letters to you must have been lost." His jaw tightened with remembered rage. "By the time I got out and made it to Montana to claim that land I'd planned for us, another 2 years had passed tracking down witnesses to clear my name completely." The revelation staggered her. All this time, she had believed he had simply abandoned her, found something or someone better out west. "Why didn't you send word when you were free? Telegraph at least." "I did." Adam's eyes darkened. 3 telegrams sent to your father's ranch. Then I heard about your father's passing and sent condolences, asking about you. Never got answers." Penelope's mind raced. After her father died, her mother had fallen into a deep depression, leaving Penelope to handle everything. The telegrams must have come during that chaotic time, or perhaps. "My brother Benjamin handled most correspondence after father died," she said slowly. "He never mentioned any telegrams from you." "Your brother never did approve of me," Adam said dryly. "Thought you deserved better than a cowboy with big dreams and empty pockets." The pieces were falling into place, a tragic series of misunderstandings and bad timing that had altered the course of their lives. "It doesn't matter now," Penelope said, though her voice lacked conviction. "What's done is done. I made vows to Thomas. Out of love." Adam challenged, stepping closer. "Or desperation," the accusation struck too close to home. "You have no idea what it was like. The bank was foreclosing. My mother was ill. My siblings needed food and shelter. Thomas offered security when we had nothing. And now? Is security enough to fill your life, Penny, to warm your bed at night? Stop it." She turned away, unable to face the truth in his eyes. "I made my choice. Did you? Or was it made for you by circumstances?" Adam moved behind her, not touching her but close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. "Tell me you love him and I'll ride away today. You'll never see me again." She opened her mouth to say the words that would send him away forever and couldn't. The lie wouldn't come. "I can't unmake my vows," she whispered instead. "I'm not asking you to, not yet." His voice was gentle. "But I won't leave Promise Creek until you hear me out completely. I owe you that much, and you owe yourself the truth." She turned to face him, keeping a careful distance. "What truth?" "That I never stopped loving you. That everything I did, every mile I rode, every fight I fought was to get back to you, to make the life we planned." His eyes held hers, unflinching. "And that I believe you still love me too." The audacity of his claim should have angered her. Instead, it pierced the carefully constructed walls around her heart, letting in dangerous hope. "I need time," she said finally. "This is overwhelming." Adam nodded, replacing his hat. "I've waited 5 years. I can wait a little longer." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His calloused thumb brushed over her knuckles. "I'm staying at the Fuller boarding house in town. When you're ready to talk more, I'll be there." He released her hand and mounted his horse in one fluid motion, the movement so familiar it brought an ache to her chest. He tipped his hat to her and rode away, leaving Penelope standing alone with the weight of the past and an uncertain future pressing down upon her. The following days passed in a fog for Penelope. She went through the motions of her daily life, cooking, cleaning, maintaining the polite fiction of her marriage, while her mind constantly returned to Adam and his revelations. Thomas noticed her distraction, but attributed it to female nerves or perhaps a seasonal melancholy. He was not an unkind man, merely an unobservant one, content with the orderly partnership their marriage provided. A week after her meeting with Adam, Penelope was arranging flowers in the parlor when a knock came at the door. She opened it to find Mrs. Wilson, the shopkeeper's wife, on her doorstep. "Good morning, Mrs. Grant." "I've brought those patterns you asked about," the older woman announced cheerfully, though Penelope had requested no such thing. Confused but polite, Penelope invited her in. As soon as the door closed, Mrs. Wilson's demeanor changed. "I came to warn you, dear," she said in a hushed tone. "People are talking. That Thornton fellow has been asking questions all over town about you, about your husband, about your circumstances. It's causing quite the stir." Penelope's stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "About when you married, how your father's ranch was lost, whether you seem happy." Mrs. Wilson looked uncomfortable. "He even asked Dr. Evans about your mother's health around the time of your wedding." The implications were clear. Adam was building a case, gathering evidence of her desperate circumstances. "Thank you for telling me," Penelope said faintly. After Mrs. Wilson left, Penelope paced the parlor, anxiety building. Adam's investigations would eventually reach Thomas's ears, creating a scandal she couldn't afford. She needed to stop him before things went too far. That afternoon, she made an excuse to go into town and headed directly to the Fuller boarding house. The proprietress, a sharp-eyed widow named Mrs. Fuller, regarded her with undisguised curiosity as she asked for Adam. "Second floor, last door on the right," Mrs. Fuller said, making no attempt to offer privacy or a parlor for their meeting. More fodder for town gossip, no doubt. Penelope climbed the stairs with determination, her knuckles rapping sharply on Adam's door before her courage could fail. The door opened, and Adam stood before her, shirt sleeves rolled up and suspenders visible. His surprise at seeing her was evident. "Penny, you need to stop," she cut him off, pushing past him into the room. "Stop asking questions about me, about my marriage." Adam closed the door, leaning against it. "I'm trying to understand what happened." "It doesn't matter what happened, it's done." She turned to face him, her composure cracking. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? This is my life, Adam, the life I built from the ashes after you disappeared. If Thomas hears these rumors, then what?" Adam challenged. "He'll discover you married him for his money and not for love." "I suspect he already knows that, Penny." The cruel accuracy of his words stung. "Our arrangement works for both of us. He wanted a wife to manage his household, to give him respectability. I needed security for my family. And that's enough for you." Adam moved closer. "To be a household manager and a banker's ornament, stop it." The Penny I knew wanted more from life. She wanted open skies and adventure. She wanted to raise horses on our own ranch. She wanted love that burned like wildfire. "That girl was a fool," Penelope said bitterly. "She learned that dreams don't feed hungry mouths or keep the bank from taking everything." "She wasn't a fool," Adam said softly. "She was the bravest woman I've ever known, and she's still in there, underneath all that proper Mrs. Grant exterior." "What do you want from me, Adam?" Exhaustion seeped into her voice. "The truth. Not just about what happened while I was gone, but about how you feel now." He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "If you can look me in the eye and tell me you don't love me anymore, I'll leave Promise Creek tomorrow." Penelope looked up into those blue eyes that had haunted her dreams for years and found she couldn't lie not to him, not anymore. "I can't say that," she whispered. "But it changes nothing. I made vows." "Vows based on a lie," Adam countered. "If you'd known I was trying to get back to you, if you'd received my letters—" "But I didn't," she interrupted. "And wishes can't change the past." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the town beyond the window. "I've purchased land," Adam said finally. 10 miles outside of town. Good grazing, plenty of water, it's everything we talked about." The revelation sent a sharp pang through her chest. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I still want that life with you. I never stopped wanting it." His gaze was steady, determined. "I know you're in an impossible situation. I know you feel bound by duty and honor. But I also know Thomas Grant doesn't love you the way I do, the way you deserve to be loved. And you think that justifies breaking my marriage vows." Despite her words, her resolve was weakening. The possibility of the life they had planned together, the life she had mourned and given up on, was almost too painful to contemplate. "I think you never would have made those vows if not for desperate circumstances, and believing I had abandoned you." Adam's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I'm not asking you to run away with me today. I'm asking you to be honest with yourself about what you want, about whether you can spend the rest of your life in a marriage without love." A knock at the door startled them both. Adam released her hand and moved to answer it. Mrs. Fuller stood there, her expression tight with disapproval. "Mrs. Grant, your husband is downstairs looking for you. Seems someone told him you were here." Penelope's blood ran cold. She smoothed her skirts with trembling hands and moved toward the door, avoiding Adam's gaze. "Thank you, Mrs. Fuller. I'll come down immediately." The older woman nodded curtly and departed, leaving them alone once more. "Penny," Adam began, "I have to go." She cut him off, panic rising in her throat. "Please, don't make this worse." Before he could respond, she hurried from the room and down the stairs, composing her features into a mask of calm she was far from feeling. Thomas stood in the boarding house foyer, hat in hand, his thin face drawn with concern that shifted to relief when he saw her. "Penelope, there you are. Mrs. Peterson said she saw you entering this establishment. I was worried." "I'm sorry to have concerned you," she replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I was just visiting an old acquaintance." Thomas's eyes narrowed slightly. "An old acquaintance, Adam Thornton. He knew my father years ago." The lie came easily, though it tasted bitter on her tongue. "He's passing through town and had some stories about Papa I hadn't heard." Thomas seemed to accept this explanation, though a slight furrow remained between his brows. "I see. Well, I've finished at the bank early today. Shall we walk home together?" "Of course." As they left the boarding house, Penelope felt Adam's eyes on her from the upstairs window but didn't dare look back. That night, as she prepared for bed, Thomas cleared his throat from the doorway of her room. "I made some inquiries about your acquaintance today," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Mr. Thornton has quite the reputation. Suspected of robbery at one point, though apparently exonerated. They say he was sweet on you years ago." Penelope's hand stilled on her hairbrush. "That was a long time ago, Thomas. Before Father died." "I see." Thomas studied her with uncharacteristic intensity. "Are you happy, Penelope?" The unexpected question caught her off guard. "What, in our marriage, are you happy?" There was no accusation in his tone, only genuine curiosity. Penelope considered lying, offering the expected reassurance, but something in his expression stopped her. "I'm content. You've been good to me and my family. I'm grateful for that." Thomas nodded slowly. "Contentment is not happiness, my dear, nor is gratitude love." He stepped further into the room, perching uncomfortably on the edge of her dressing table chair. "I was married before, you know, to a leaner, for 17 years. This was not news to Penelope. She knew his first wife had died of fever 3 years before their marriage. "I loved her deeply," Thomas continued, surprising her with his candor. "When she died, I thought I would never feel that way again, and I was right." His gaze met hers directly. "What we have is a partnership, Penelope. A good one in many ways, but it isn't love, not on either side." Penelope's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "Thomas," he held up a hand. "Please let me finish. I married you because you are kind, intelligent, and capable, because I was lonely and you needed security. I have no regrets about that. But I've seen how you look when you think no one is watching, like a bird in a cage, staring at the sky beyond the bars." Tears welled in her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. I've tried to be a good wife. You have been, Thomas assured her, his voice gentle. But perhaps neither of us has been entirely honest about what we wanted from this marriage. The conversation left Penelope sleepless once more, Thomas's unexpected insight forcing her to confront truths she had been avoiding. Had she been so transparent in her discontent? And what did his observations mean for their future? The following morning brought no clarity, only an awkward breakfast with Thomas before he departed for the bank. She spent the day in restless activity, scrubbing floors that didn't need cleaning, organizing shelves that were already in order. Mid-afternoon, a commotion from town drew her attention, shouting, and what sounded like a scuffle. From her front porch, she could see a crowd gathering in the street outside the saloon. Curiosity overpowering caution, Penelope made her way toward town, joining other neighbors moving in the same direction. The scene that greeted her made her blood run cold. Adam stood in the dusty street, facing three rough-looking men she didn't recognize. The tension in the air was palpable. "What's happening?" she asked a woman nearby. "Those men rode in claiming that Thornton fellow stole their horses," the woman replied, eyes bright with excitement at the drama. "Called him a thief and a murderer." Horror filled Penelope as she pushed through the crowd. The largest of the men was speaking, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent street. "We tracked you across 2 territories, Thornton. Thought you could get away with stealing our remuda and shooting our foreman." "I never stole your horses, Decker," Adam replied calmly, though Penelope could see the dangerous set of his shoulders. "Your foreman tried to hang me for something I didn't do. I defended myself. The law in Fort Smith already cleared me." "The law ain't here now," Decker sneered, hand hovering near his pistol. Sheriff Mills pushed through the crowd, his weathered face grim. "That's enough. There'll be no gunplay in my town." "This ain't your concern, Sheriff," Decker said. "This is between us and Thornton." "Everything in Promise Creek is my concern," the sheriff countered. "Now, if you've got legitimate grievances, we can discuss them civilly. Otherwise, you can ride on." The standoff stretched for several tense moments before Decker spat in the dirt. "This ain't over, Thornton. We'll settle up, one way or another." As the men backed away toward the saloon, the crowd began to disperse, disappointment evident on many faces at being denied the spectacle of violence. Adam's eyes found Penelope in the crowd, concern replacing the cold determination of moments before. He moved toward her, but she turned away, hurrying back toward home, her mind in turmoil. She had nearly reached her house when footsteps behind her announced his pursuit. "Penny, wait." She stopped, turning to face him. "Those men, they called you a thief and a murderer. And you believed them." The hurt in his voice was palpable. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she admitted. "Every day brings new revelations, new complications. I feel like I'm standing on quicksand." "Those men worked for the McDermott gang," Adam explained. "The same outfit that got me wrongfully imprisoned. When I finally tracked down witnesses to clear my name, I uncovered their operation stealing horses across the territory. Their foreman tried to silence me permanently. I defended myself." The sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable, but Penelope had been blindsided too many times recently to trust her judgment. "Why did you really come back, Adam? After all this time, why now?" "I told you, no more pretty words or grand declarations," she interrupted. "The simple truth." Adam's expression sobered. "I finally had something to offer you, the land, a future. I couldn't come back empty-handed after all this time. And if I had been happy in my marriage, if I had truly loved Thomas, then I would have left you in peace," he said quietly. "I came to find out if you were happy, Penny. That's the truth. If you had been, I would have ridden away without ever speaking to you. The answer should have reassured her, but it only underscored the impossibility of their situation. And now, those men clearly aren't going to leave you alone. I can handle Decker and his boys, with more violence. She shook her head. This is exactly why I couldn't wait for you 5 years ago, Adam. The uncertainty, the danger, that's not fair, he cut in. I didn't choose what happened to me, neither did I. The words burst from her with unexpected force. I didn't choose to lose my father, to watch my mother fall apart, to face losing everything. I made the only choice I could. The raw honesty hung between them, neither able to bridge the gulf of circumstance and misunderstanding that had separated them for so long. I should go, Penelope said finally. Thomas will be home soon. Adam nodded, his expression unreadable. This isn't over, Penny. Not between us, and not with Decker. Be careful. His warning followed her home, adding to the weight of anxiety pressing down on her. Something was building to a breaking point. She could feel it in the air, like the electric tension before a storm. That evening, Thomas was unusually quiet during dinner, his attention focused on his plate rather than his customary newspaper. Is everything all right? Penelope asked as she cleared the dishes. Thomas looked up, seeming to debate something internally before speaking. There was an incident at the bank today. A man came in asking about our finances, yours and mine. Penelope's hand froze in the act of stacking plates. What man? One of the strangers who rode in today. Large fellow, scar across his chin, called himself Decker. Thomas's expression was troubled. He seemed particularly interested in the deed to this house and our holdings. Cold fear gripped Penelope's heart. What did you tell him? Nothing, of course. Banking information is confidential. Thomas removed his spectacles, polishing them methodically, but his interest was concerning. Sheriff Mills escorted him out eventually. These men are dangerous, Thomas. The words escaped before she could consider them. Thomas's gaze sharpened. You know something about them? Penelope hesitated, torn between honesty and protection. Only what I overheard in town. They have some quarrel with Adam Thornton. A quarrel that now appears to involve us somehow. Thomas replaced his spectacles. Penelope, I think it's time you told me the full truth about your history with this man. For a moment, she considered further evasion, but the events of the day had left her too exhausted for more lies. She sat down heavily at the table. Adam and I were in love years ago, before Father died. He went west to stake a claim, promising to return for me. The words came easier now, the story unfolding like an old, painful wound being drained. He never came back, never wrote. I believed he had abandoned me. Thomas listened without interruption as she recounted everything: her weight, her father's death, the family's desperate circumstances, and finally, Adam's return and his explanation for his long absence. When she finished, silence filled the kitchen, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the mantel. I see, Thomas said finally, and now he wants you back. It wasn't a question, but Penelope nodded anyway, unable to meet his eyes. You want to go to him? The directness of the question startled her into looking up. There was no anger in Thomas's expression, only a sad resignation that made her heart ache with guilt. I don't know, she admitted. I made vows to you, Thomas. I won't break them. Vows made under duress, it seems. He sighed heavily. I'm not a romantic man, Penelope. I know I've never inspired passion in you, but I do care for your well-being, and I won't hold you to promises made in desperation. His words left her speechless. Was he offering to release her from their marriage? Before she could formulate a response, a sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Thomas rose to answer it, returning moments later with Sheriff Mills, whose grave expression sent a new wave of dread through Penelope. Mrs. Grant, Mr. Grant. The sheriff nodded to them both. "Sorry to disturb your evening, but there's been trouble. Those men who rode in today, they confronted Thornton again outside of town. Shots were fired." Penelope's heart seemed to stop. "Adam, is he?" "He's alive," the sheriff assured her quickly. "Took a bullet to the shoulder, but Doc Evans says he'll recover. Problem is, he killed one of those men, Decker's brother. Self-defense, according to witnesses, but Decker's swearing vengeance." "Where is Adam now?" Penelope asked, rising from her chair. "At Doc Evans's office." "But madam, that's not why I'm here." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Decker was ranting about burning out everyone connected to Thornton. He specifically mentioned your name, Mrs. Grant." Thomas stepped forward. "Are you saying my wife is in danger because of her past association with this man?" "I'm saying it might be prudent for both of you to stay somewhere else tonight, at least until we locate Decker and his remaining man," Sheriff Mills replied. "They were last seen riding toward the saloon, likely drinking up their courage. I've got deputies watching, but—" "We understand," Thomas said grimly. "Thank you for the warning, Sheriff." After Mills departed, Thomas moved with surprising efficiency, gathering essential items while Penelope stood frozen in shock. "We'll go to the bank," he decided. "The back room has a cot I use during late nights. It's secure, iron bars on the windows, heavy door." "Thomas, I'm so sorry," Penelope whispered. "This is all because of me, because of my past with Adam." "No," he corrected her, his voice firm. "This is because of violent men making choices that have nothing to do with you. Now, gather what you need, quickly." They slipped out of the house under cover of darkness, taking the back streets to avoid being seen. The bank stood dark and imposing on Main Street, its solid brick construction offering at least the illusion of safety. Once inside, Thomas lit a lamp, casting long shadows across the polished counters and brass fittings. The back room he mentioned was small but neat, with a narrow cot, a desk, and a small stove. "It's not comfortable, but it's safe," he said, setting down their bags. "Try to get some rest." "I'll keep watch." Penelope sank onto the cot, the events of the day catching up to her in a wave of exhaustion. "What happens now, Thomas? With everything?" He regarded her thoughtfully in the lamplight. "That depends on what you want, my dear. For tonight we stay safe. Tomorrow we can discuss the future." She nodded, too drained to pursue the conversation further. As Thomas dimmed the lamp and settled into the desk chair, Penelope closed her eyes, her thoughts turning inevitably to Adam, wounded but alive, and what that meant for all of them. Sleep came fitfully, disturbed by dreams of gunfire and burning buildings. She woke to gray dawn light filtering through the barred windows and the smell of coffee. Thomas had somehow procured breakfast bread, cheese, and hot coffee from the hotel across the street. "Any news?" she asked, accepting a cup gratefully. "Sheriff came by earlier. No sign of Decker or his man overnight. They're continuing the search." Thomas hesitated. "He also mentioned that Thornton was asking for you, quite insistently, apparently." Penelope's hands tightened around the warm cup. "I should see him." "Yes, I think you should." Thomas's calm agreement surprised her. "This situation won't resolve itself while you're hiding in a bank vault, my dear. What about you? If Decker is still looking for revenge, I'll be fine here. The bank opens soon, and there will be people around." He offered a thin smile. "I doubt even Decker would attempt violence in a crowded bank in broad daylight." After finishing her breakfast, Penelope straightened her wrinkled dress as best she could and prepared to leave. At the door, Thomas stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. "Penelope, whatever you decide, I want you to know I don't blame you for any of it." Tears pricked at her eyes. In his own reserved way, Thomas was offering her freedom, a gift she had never expected and wasn't sure she deserved. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing his hand before stepping out into the morning light. Promise Creek was beginning to stir, shopkeepers opening their doors, early risers heading to the cafe for breakfast. Penelope moved quickly toward Dr. Evans's office at the end of the street, her mind racing with all that had happened and all that might yet come. The doctor's wife, who served as his nurse and receptionist, greeted her at the door with knowing eyes. "He's in the back room, Mrs. Grant. Been asking for you since he woke up." Adam was propped up on a narrow examination table, his left shoulder heavily bandaged, face pale but alert. His eyes found hers the moment she entered the room. "Penny." Relief colored his voice. "You're all right. Me, you're the one who got shot." She moved to his side, fighting the urge to touch him, to assure herself he was truly alive. "Decker didn't find you then. The sheriff said he was making threats." "No, Thomas and I stayed at the bank. It was secure." She studied his face, noting the lines of pain around his eyes despite his attempt to appear strong. "How bad is it?" Clean through the shoulder. "Doc says I was lucky missed anything vital." Adam's good hand reached for hers, and this time she didn't pull away. "I'm sorry, Penny. I never meant to bring danger to your door. I know." And she did know with a certainty that surprised her. Whatever else had happened, whatever misunderstandings had separated them, Adam would never intentionally put her at risk. "What happened out there?" Adam's expression darkened. "Decker and his men ambushed me on the road back from my property. Said they were going to finish what they started years ago, make an example of me." His grip on her hand tightened. "I tried to talk them down, Penny. I swear I did. But they drew first. I believe you." The words came easily, honestly. A brief silence fell between them, filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. "Sheriff Mills thinks Decker and his remaining man have fled," Penelope said finally. "But they could return." "They will," Adam said grimly. "Men like Decker don't let go of a grudge. That's why you need to stay away from me, at least until this is resolved." "And how will it be resolved? More violence, more bloodshed?" Adam sighed, wincing as the movement jarred his injured shoulder. "I don't know, but I won't let them hurt you, Penny. Even if that means I have to leave Promise Creek." The thought of him leaving again, perhaps forever this time, sent a sharp pain through her chest that had nothing to do with physical danger. "No," she said, surprising herself with the firmness of her tone. "No more running, not for either of us." Before Adam could respond, the door burst open, and Dr. Evans rushed in, his normally composed features tight with alarm. "Mrs. Grant, you need to come quickly. The bank, there's a fire." Penelope's world narrowed to a single, horrifying point of understanding. "Thomas." She was running before conscious thought could form, ignoring Adam's shout behind her, the doctor's warning. Outside, smoke was visible rising from the direction of Main Street, dark against the morning sky. She rounded the corner onto Main Street and stopped in horror. The bank was engulfed in flames, thick black smoke billowing from the windows. A crowd had gathered, men forming a bucket line from the water trough, but their efforts seemed pitifully inadequate against the inferno. "Thomas!" She screamed, starting forward only to be caught around the waist and pulled back. "You can't go in there," Sheriff Mills said, restraining her as she struggled. "Building's about to collapse. My husband is in there." Penelope fought against his hold, desperate, frantic. "Mrs. Grant." The sheriff's voice cut through her panic. "Mr. Grant is safe. He's over there with Dr. Evans." Following his gesture, she saw Thomas sitting on a crate outside the general store, a blanket around his shoulders, his face blackened with soot but very much alive. Relief made her knees buckle. The sheriff steadied her, then released her as she regained her composure. "What happened?" she asked, moving toward Thomas. "Decker," Mills answered grimly. "Witnesses saw him and his man ride up, throw something through the window, and gallop off. Coal oil by the smell of it." Thomas looked up as she approached, his expression dazed. "Penelope, thank God you weren't there." She knelt beside him, taking his hands in hers. They were trembling. "Are you hurt?" "No, just some smoke. I was near the back door when the fire started, got out just in time." His eyes moved to the burning building, something like disbelief in his gaze. "Everything's gone. All the records, the deposits." "None of that matters," she said fiercely. "You're alive." A commotion behind them made her turn. Adam was pushing through the crowd, his injured arm in a sling, face pale but determined. "They're heading north," he announced to Sheriff Mills. Someone at the livery saw them ride out, taking the trail toward the Carson place. Mills nodded grimly. "I'll gather a posse." "I'm coming with you," Adam stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You're in no condition," the sheriff began. "This is my fight. They came after Penelope because of me. They burned down the bank because of me." Adam's jaw was set in a hard line. "I'm ending this one way or another." Penelope rose, moving to stand before him. "You can barely sit a horse with that shoulder. I'll manage." His eyes softened as they met hers. "I won't let them hurt anyone else I care about." The determination in his voice told her arguing would be useless. Adam had always been stubborn, especially when protecting those he loved. "Then I'm coming too," she declared. "Absolutely not." Both Adam and Thomas said simultaneously, then glanced at each other in surprise. "Penelope," Thomas continued, rising shakily to his feet. "This is no place for 'don't you dare say a woman,'" she interrupted. "The Carson place is 15 miles north. I know those trails better than any of you. My father and I hunted those hills for years." Sheriff Mills looked between them, clearly calculating the value of her knowledge against the risk. "Mrs. Grant has a point. We could use a guide who knows the territory." "It's too dangerous," Adam insisted. "I'll stay back with the supplies," Penelope compromised. "But I'm coming, Adam." "This involves me too." The debate might have continued, but shouts from down the street announced new trouble. The fire had spread to the adjacent building, threatening the entire block if not contained. "We need to move now before their trail goes cold," Mills decided. "Mrs. Grant, if you're coming, get ready. We ride in 20 minutes." He turned to organize the posse, leaving no room for further argument. Adam's expression was thunderous, but he said nothing more as Penelope hurried to gather what she would need. Thomas followed her, still unsteady but determined. "Penelope, wait." He caught her arm gently. "Are you certain about this?" "I have to do this, Thomas. I can't explain it, but I have to see this through." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand, but promise me you'll be careful." "I will," she assured him, touched by his concern. "And when you return," he added quietly, "we'll need to talk about our future, or rather, the lack of one we share." The implication was clear, and despite the chaos surrounding them, Penelope felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Thomas, not now," he interrupted gently. "Go. Do what you must. We'll settle everything when you return safely." 20 minutes later, Penelope found herself riding north with Sheriff Mills, Adam, and 4 other men from town. Adam had insisted on riding beside her, his face drawn with pain he refused to acknowledge. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, for perhaps the 5th time since they'd set out. "Neither should you with that shoulder," she countered. "Yet here we both are." A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. "You always were stubborn as a mule." "A quality we share, apparently." Their banter fell away as they traveled deeper into the rough country north of Promise Creek. The trail narrowed, forcing them to ride single file through dense pine forest that eventually gave way to rocky terrain dotted with scrub oak and juniper. Penelope took the lead, guiding them through a maze of canyons and draws that few outsiders knew well. By mid-afternoon, They had reached a high ridge overlooking a secluded valley where the Carson place, an abandoned homestead, stood in silent testimony to the harshness of frontier life. There, Mills pointed. 2 horses were tethered outside the dilapidated cabin. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting recent occupation. "They're still here," Adam said, his voice hard. "Probably think they're safe, that no one knows this hideout." Mills outlined his plan quickly. They would approach from different directions, surrounding the cabin before calling for Decker and his man to surrender. "And if they refuse?" one of the posse members asked. The sheriff's expression was grim. "Then we do what needs to be done." Penelope was instructed to remain on the ridge with the supplies and horses, a position that allowed her to observe without being directly in danger. She watched anxiously as the men spread out, working their way down into the valley with careful precision. Adam, despite his injury, moved with the quiet competence of a man accustomed to dangerous situations. She could see the pain in his stiff movements, but his determination never wavered. As the men took their positions around the cabin, time seemed to stretch and slow. Penelope held her breath, knuckles white where she gripped the binoculars borrowed from one of the posse members. Sheriff Mills's voice shattered the silence, calling for Decker to surrender, to come out with hands raised. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. Then the cabin door burst open, and gunfire erupted. Penelope gasped as she saw Adam dive for cover behind a water trough, narrowly avoiding bullets that splintered the wood where he had stood moments before. The firefight was brief but intense. Through the binoculars, she saw Decker's companion fall, clutching his leg. Decker himself emerged from the cabin with a rifle, firing wildly as he attempted to reach the horses. What happened next seemed to unfold in terrible slow motion. Decker spotted Adam, who had moved to cut off his escape route. With a roar of rage, he swung his rifle toward him, finger tightening on the trigger. Penelope screamed a warning that couldn't possibly carry across the distance. But in that same instant, Sheriff Mills appeared behind Decker, his pistol raised. 2 shots rang out almost simultaneously. Decker staggered, then fell face forward into the dirt. He didn't move again. The silence that followed seemed deafening. Penelope watched as the men converged cautiously on the fallen figures, checking for signs of life. Relief flooded through her when she saw Adam standing, apparently unharmed. She descended from the ridge quickly, leading the horses down a steep trail to the valley floor. By the time she reached the cabin, the situation was under control. Decker was dead, his companion wounded but alive and in custody. Adam came to her immediately, his good arm pulling her into an embrace that spoke volumes about his fear for her safety, even at this distance from the danger. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. "It's finally over." She clung to him, heedless of the others watching, of propriety or convention. The past hours had stripped away pretense, leaving only the raw truth of what mattered most. "Let's go home," she whispered. The journey back to Promise Creek was slower, burdened by a prisoner and the somber weight of death, regardless of how justified. They arrived as dusk was falling, the town still in disarray from the morning's fire. The bank building was a blackened shell, but the fire had been contained before spreading further, a small mercy in a day filled with violence and loss. Thomas was waiting at the sheriff's office, his clothes still smelling of smoke but his manner composed. His eyes found Penelope's immediately, searching for reassurance of her safety, before noting her proximity to Adam with a resigned acceptance. After the prisoner was secured and statements taken, Penelope found herself standing between the 2 men who had shaped her life so profoundly, one who had offered security in her darkest hour, and one who had held her heart through years of separation. "We should talk," Thomas said quietly. All three of us. They walked in silence to Thomas's office, a small building behind what remained of the bank that had been spared the flames. Inside, Thomas lit a lamp and gestured for them to sit. "I think we all know what must happen now," he began without preamble. "The events of today have merely accelerated what was already inevitable." Penelope's throat tightened. "Thomas," he held up a hand. "Please, let me finish. Our marriage has always been one of convenience, Penelope. I offered you security when you needed it most, and you gave me companionship and respectability. But we both know it was never meant to be forever." Adam sat stiffly, his injured shoulder clearly paining him, but his gaze was steady on Thomas. "What are you saying, Mr. Grant?" "I'm saying that I will not stand in the way of what clearly exists between you two." Thomas removed his spectacles, pinching the bridge of his nose wearily. "I may not be a romantic man, but I'm not blind either. You love each other. You always have." The simple truth of his words hung in the air between them. "There are legal ways to end a marriage," Thomas continued. "It will require some time, some paperwork. There may be talk, of course, but I suspect people will be more focused on rebuilding after today's fire than on the dissolution of our arrangement." Penelope stared at him, overwhelmed by his generosity. "Why would you do this?" Thomas smiled faintly. "Because, my dear, contentment is a poor substitute for happiness. I've had true love once in my life. I know the difference." He glanced at Adam. "And I suspect Mr. Thornton does as well." Adam nodded slowly, respect evident in his expression. "I do." "Then it's settled." Thomas rose, signaling an end to the conversation. "I'll begin the necessary arrangements tomorrow. In the meantime, I suggest you both get some rest. It's been a trying day for everyone." Outside, the night had fully descended, stars appearing in a velvet sky above the town. Adam and Penelope walked slowly, neither quite ready to part despite their exhaustion. "He's a better man than I gave him credit for," Adam admitted. "Yes," Penelope agreed softly. "He is." They stopped at the crossroads where their paths would diverge. Adam to the boarding house, Penelope to where? Not to the house she had shared with Thomas, not tonight. "What happens now?" she asked, echoing her earlier question to Thomas, but with an entirely different meaning. Adam took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm as he had years ago. "Now we build the life we always planned, if that's still what you want." "It is," she whispered. "It always has been." He leaned down, brushing his lips against hers in a kiss that held promise rather than possession, a beginning rather than an end. "Tomorrow," he said. "We'll start tomorrow." The following weeks passed in a blur of activity and adjustment. The town rallied to rebuild after the fire, with Thomas taking the lead in establishing a temporary bank office and recovering what records could be salvaged. True to his word, he initiated the legal proceedings to end his marriage to Penelope, handling the matter with a dignity and discretion that earned him the community's respect rather than censure. Penelope moved into Mrs. Fuller's boarding house in a room distinctly separate from Adam's, a concession to propriety while their situation remained in transition. They spent their days working on the property Adam had purchased, planning the ranch they had dreamed of years before. The land was everything he had promised: rolling hills perfect for grazing, a clear stream providing ample water, and views that stretched to distant mountains. Together they mapped out where the house would stand, where corrals would be built, where the first horses would roam. On a golden afternoon in late October, as they sat beside the stream sharing a simple lunch, Adam turned to her with an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of hope, uncertainty, and determination. "I've been thinking," he began, setting aside his plate, "about waiting." Penelope raised an eyebrow. "Waiting? for the divorce to be final, for the house to be built, for everything to be perfect. He took her hand, his thumb finding its familiar place against her palm. "I'm tired of waiting, Penny. We've lost 5 years already." Her heart quickened. "What are you suggesting?" In answer, Adam reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that caught the sunlight, a ring, simple but beautifully crafted, a small diamond set in gold. "I bought this in Denver before I ever reached Promise Creek," he said quietly. "I've carried it all this time, waiting for the right moment." His blue eyes held hers, earnest and unwavering. "I don't want to wait anymore. Marry me, Penny, as soon as you're free. We can build our life together day by day instead of waiting for some perfect future that might never come." Tears blurred her vision as she looked at the ring, tangible proof of his faith in their future, even when separation and circumstance had conspired against them. "Yes," she whispered, then laughed through her tears. "Yes, of course I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, where it caught the sunlight like a promise made visible. Then he gathered her into his arms, mindful of his healing shoulder, and kissed her with all the passion and tenderness of 5 years' longing. December brought the legal end to Penelope's marriage to Thomas, handled with such discretion that it caused barely a ripple in the town's gossip. January saw the foundation laid for their ranch house, with neighbors and friends joining to raise the walls despite winter's chill. And on a clear February morning, with snow blanketing the hills and sunshine turning the world to diamond brilliance, Penelope stood beside Adam in Promise Creek's small church, speaking vows that had lived in her heart for years. Thomas attended the ceremony, his presence a testament to his remarkable character. After the simple service, he approached them with genuine good wishes and a surprising gift, the deed to 40 additional acres adjoining their property. "Consider it a wedding present," he said, pressing the document into Adam's hand despite his protests, "and perhaps a small investment in the future. I've always had an interest in horse breeding." As winter gave way to spring, and spring to summer, the ranch took shape around them. The house, though still unfinished in places, became their home. The first horses, a small herd of quality mares and a stallion Adam had tracked down in Colorado, grazed contentedly in the pastures they had fenced together. On a warm evening in August, they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Adam's arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him in comfortable familiarity. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Penelope asked, her hand absently caressing her slightly rounded belly where their first child was beginning to make its presence known. "If you had received my letters, or if I had gotten yours?" Adam considered the question, his fingers playing with a strand of her hair. "Sometimes. But then I remember that we're here now together. The path was longer and harder than we expected, but it led us home." "Home," she repeated, savoring the word and all it meant, not just the physical structure they had built, but the life they were creating together. The years of separation and misunderstanding had taught them both the value of what they now shared. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Penelope thought of all the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment, the desperation that had led her to marry Thomas, the determination that had brought Adam back to her, and the love that had survived against all odds. They had found their way back to each other not as the young, idealistic couple they had once been, but as people who had faced hardship and loss, who understood the fragility of happiness and the strength required to protect it. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the sound echoing across the valley that was now their domain. Adam's arm tightened around her, and Penelope closed her eyes, content in the knowledge that after all the waiting, all the heartache, They had finally found their way home to the land they had dreamed of, and to each other's hearts. 5 years after that fateful reunion in Promise Creek, the Thornton Ranch had become one of the most successful horse breeding operations in the territory. What had begun with a small herd had grown into a thriving business, their horses sought after for their strength, intelligence, and steady temperament. The house had expanded along with their family 2 sons, and a daughter now filled the rooms with laughter and energy that reminded Penelope daily of how empty her life had once been, and how full it had become. Thomas Grant had indeed become a silent partner in their venture, his financial acumen helping to guide their business decisions. He had remarried the previous year, a widow from Denver, who shared his practical nature and appreciation for order, and seemed to have found his own measure of happiness. On the anniversary of their wedding, Adam surprised Penelope with a locket containing miniature portraits of their children, engraved with words that summed up their journey. Worth every mile, worth every day. As she fastened it around her neck, she caught his reflection watching her in the mirror. His eyes filled with the same love that had brought him back to her across years and distance. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Thornton," he said, coming to stand behind her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "Happy anniversary, my love." Penelope turned to face him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Would you do it all again?" Even knowing how hard the road would be, Adam's answer was immediate and certain. "Every step, every struggle, every moment if it meant ending up here with you." And as he kissed her, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that this was always where they were meant to be, not in spite of the separation and heartache they had endured, but perhaps because of it. For it was in losing each other that they had truly learned the value of what they had found. Outside, the sun set on another day on the ranch they had built together, casting long shadows across the land that had once been just a dream shared by 2 young hearts. Now, it was their reality, a testament to love that had survived distance, time, and desperation, to find its way home at last.